Okay, so welcome everyone to the online viewing room at the 47th edition of FIAC and the second edition of the conversation room. Welcome to the panelists. Welcome Liyu, our moderator today. I'm going to let Liyu introduce the panelists and start with the conversation.
Thank you, Victoria, and welcome everyone to our conversation. Today, we're very honored and happy to welcome a distinguished panel to talk about the development of private art museum in Asia, and in particular, the invention of new art projects and the engagement of art patronage in China. And today we've got Larys Frogier, who is the director of the Rockbund Art Museum in Shanghai since 2012, curator, critic, and art historian. Larry is involved in artistic and social challenges in the post-global context where ongoing social, economical, cultural transformations demand new ways of interrelations, citizenship, and reinvented creativity. Chair of the Hugo Boss Asia Art Jury since 2013, he conceived this new award, exhibition, and research program as an evolving platform to promote emerging artists and to question Asia as the construction to investigate rather than a monolithic area of fixed identities. He co-conceived symposia and seminars related to contemporary art, curating, and social engagement in 21st century China. Previously, the director of Contemporary Art Center Larys in Rennes, France, Larry curated the European Collaborative Project, ACT Democracy, questioning the links and ruptures between broadening transcontinental areas. He's curated numerous exhibitions and published extensive essays on the works of international artists such as Philippe Parinaud, Paolo Pivi, Ugo Rondinone, Zheng Fanzhi, and Chai Guoqiang. Larry taught art history, history of art, and curatorial studies at the University of Rennes, where he's also researcher at the École des Hautes Études in Science, Social Sciences, and at the Archive for Art Criticism. So welcome, Larry, and thank you again for joining us. So, Larry, I thought I'll just start by discussing with you. Can you share with us your vision for the Rockbund Art Museum and how it has evolved over the years, and how you think all that has changed again, due to the pandemic?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Liyu, for this generous introduction, and I would like also to thank Jessia from the Simeon Collection to contribute to this panel discussion, and of course Oranda, who is part of the Rockbund Art Museum team, and it's a great honor for me to be part of this conversation, and I would like to send my deep gratitude to the stunning, marvelous team of the FIAC. So I'm really happy to introduce to you. And Liyu, to answer to your first question, the question of the vision is very important for the museum, because we are in the context of the Asia in general, and then we are trying to develop. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think as a private art museum based in Shanghai and trying to connect with different areas, could it be in Europe or in Central Asia or in Southeast Asia or in Africa, but also in the US. So it's also a way to develop some projects that are fully engaged in this, I would say, this horizon that makes the project relevant locally but also in this very constructive cooperation. So the question of the vision, it is an image of the museum, is related to its physicality. It's an amazing building from the 1930, renovated for the opening of the museum in 2010 by David Chipperfield. And then we, during the pandemic, closed the door for a new renovation by the designer and architect Alexei Doni. So it's an amazing building. And when I visited for the very first time this place, I was completely stunned by the way David Chipperfield transformed this building that has very straight line, geometrical forms into a kind of open space, very elegant, as a horizon. So in my mind were coming many projects, because when you work on a vision, it's quite easy to do a program or to have a label of a museum as either connected to a specific discipline or art practice, or to a topic, or to technology with the new media. But for me, this is not the most important. The vision is more related to a dream. How today, especially in the context, we can go beyond some limitation as institutional, go also beyond this kind of branding or the physicality of the building. So it's how from Shanghai we can really share with the artist and the audience this capacity of repositioning constantly ourselves. And of course, it's not about a vision. Is not about a program. It's not about identity. It's really how you can share with the artist and the audience the making of the image. So how can we imagine art projects that can not be limited to an institutional one? And especially knowing that the history of the museum are coming from the West. So how, from the context in which we are working, we can invent some art projects that have more to do with the subtle, often invisible, but very deep questions and practices. So this is an example of the exhibition with Ugo Rondino. He invested all the 6th floor of the museum with kind of rainbow wall painting and performers coming each day inside the museum to sleep and to rest and to meditate. So this is about this, instead of defining, controlling, possessing. It's not about territory for me, a museum. It's about extension. It's about how can we experience change. And also, for me, a museum is not only a space, it's a practice. So how can we walk alone? How can we walk with other people? How can we pass through the space? How can we dive in it or even float and splashing is also the reason why we made this amazing project with Felix Gonzalez Torres in 2016 with the Felix Gonzalez Torres Foundation. And that was extremely moving project. But this is also why with the museum, because Shanghai literally means on the sea, but also because of my origins. And I think the curatorial practices made me rethink when I arrived in Asia, in China, how can we have, I would say, non-continental vision of a museum. So that's why I'm very interested in a kind of oceanic vision of institutions. It means is always constant transformation from one project to another, but also in terms of cooperation is to consider and to go through the different layers. I say it water, but for me it's also about how do we remake histories evolving with the streams, how can we face encounters, conflicts, violence, or moving with the blow of the wind that can connect with the way of breathing. Freedom, traveling from the observation of the stars, is about dreaming and escaping, interconnecting in between water, islands, and with other lands or continents, with the hope of friendship, love, and solidarities. Because when you look at the map of Asia, more than half of the area is made of water. So the water is extremely important in the context of Asia, much more than the one in Europe. So that's how I learned a lot when we started cooperation with artists, Chinese artists, Asian artists. That it is a so rich context with differences and specific ways of developing art projects. There is also the history of exhibitions that is missing still. So we are trying to research, make projects that are, of course, made of exhibitions. I will introduce maybe later, if we still have time, some of the project, but it's really about, how can we make visible in another way the different contexts of localities in Asia. Yeah, that's what I just said. So the way we are working on the museum project, we do not have nearly anymore, except for the internal operation, but we are naming the projects as art project, not as exhibition, because also we are working on long-term art projects with artists or with researchers. Can be philosophers or poets or musicians or anthropologists and so on. So this is for the 21-22, this kind of titles that I find very beautiful because it goes from one private name to a topic like the curtailing. And we also develop art and research commissions beyond exhibition program. We are helping a lot of young Chinese and Asian artists. So we are commissioning artworks that can give full support to the artists. We have a wonderful cooperation with the Sandretro Rere di Podengo Foundation in Torino, because they developed a young curators residency program. So now we are part of it, bringing new proposals also related to Asian young curators. And also we work with a locality, especially in Shanghai, you have this amazing area of the Bund, and we are connecting with the local people to develop 3 years project made of research about the history of this area, music, about the production of sounds, and then also events, inviting people to bring their own story to the museum. And then we have, as I was saying, it's not about the East and the West. I think it's already outdated or meaningless. It's about as we go or as you go, that we find other paths, other way to cooperate. That's why we are very much interested in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Africa, Central Europe also. We are developing project, and this project is conceived by Biljana Sirik, interdependent curator. So, voila, Liyu, did I answer to your question?
And I am also very interested because I know that, you know, the Rockbund Art Museum has got a lot of very interesting, interesting projects. And there's one I kind of remember reading about was about the RAM Plus. And I was wondering you could just tell us more a bit about this particular project. Yeah. Especially in the light of the fact that right now, I know in mainland China, I think, you know, the Bitcoin has just been banned. And so I also like to know your views and kind of how you feel that will impact, you know, the digital museum or NFT that, you know, yeah.
Yeah, RAM Plus is, I would say, is a new museum. Is not only something on the side of the physical museum of the Rockbund Art Museum. RAM Plus is really a new museum with artist project, research project, also dedicated to digital, but not only. And of course, we are questioning the connection of digital art with the NFT, the non-fungible token, the virtual currency. And because we are a non-profit organization, you know, so we have to take care about how we keep safe the quality of the relation with the artist, and also is about territoriality, because with the digital art and the NFT is like open to any possibilities that could be bad or good. And so we are willing to bring a kind of expertise in this field as an institution, not only to select, but really to support digital artists and NFT art. So I think today, especially with the pandemic, we are experiencing radical changes, financial, economical, social, cultural. And of course, there are decisive mutations in the way of making art for the artist, and also in the question of curatorial practices. What does it mean today with a digital museum to curate a project? So we are thinking about, and we started by the 21, the end of May, with an amazing project conceived by the Chinese artist Tsai Guo, who made not a digital artwork, but he made a video to make it as an NFT art, you know. So it's also for the museum a way to, I would say, develop the fundraising for the museum related to NFT. But for us, we first focus on RAM Plus with artist project, how we can produce the artworks, and some of the projects can be connected with NFT. But this is why also we need the cooperation with other platforms who can help us to make this connection with the NFT and also the visibility of the project. So it's a new world, and it's very exciting to engage in it. So I won't go into the details of all of this. I talked already about, but I think many platforms are emerging, galleries and auction houses are very much engaged in this. I think now is decisive that institutions like museums bring kind of solid expertise in digital and NFT. And of course, it's about the respect of the copyrights for artists, and to keep safe with digital money, in connection with the art collectors. So this is something that is also, yeah, I mean, radical change. But for me, there's no contradiction between the physicality and the virtual, and is really part of our life today. And it's just how we can, when conceptual art or performance was emerging in the 60s, it was already, we shared the same questions about the authenticity of the work, the originality of the work, and the way we can reproduce an artwork. And the case of González Durez is one very good example. So yeah, we are trying to develop and to think about from the legal contract with the artist and the partner, we can invent new projects. And we are welcoming also other proposals with other art organizations. But I think Oranda can also introduce later or now better this connection.
Okay, yes. So we'll now kind of I'll talk a bit, discuss a bit on the second part of our conversation, which is about art patronage in the private museums. And we have Oranda Hou, who's been the Senior Development Manager of the Rockbund Museum in Shanghai since 2019, and leading the institution's fundraising efforts and interdisciplinary collaborations. Oranda aspires to expand the large audience's access to arts and culture, and to help create opportunities for breaking down barriers and construct enablers for meaningful exchange and communication. Oranda previously worked at an investment bank in Hong Kong and New York, and at startups and nonprofits in Bangkok, La Paz, and Shanghai. And we also have on our panel Jie Xia, who is the director of the Simeon Collection. Jie manages the Simeon Collection, founded by collector Ms. Simeon Wang. The diversified collection includes both established and emerging artists from the globe, with important works covering paintings, sculptures, different mediums, and design. The Simeon Collection aims to fulfill the gap between institutions and artists by providing academic research in contemporary art. It supports programs of arts in general by donating to institutions, sponsoring young artists' career, and loaning works to museums. Jie's career started with Christie's New York and had extensive sales and management experience in leading galleries like Lehman Maupin and Tanja Grenade. Jie holds a Bachelor of Art with double major in philosophy and critical social thought from Mount Holyoke College, and received her Master of Art with distinction from Sotheby's Institute of Arts Art Business Program in New York. Jie currently serves on the advisory board of the Mount Holyoke Art Museum and is USPAP, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, tested appraiser in the United States. So thank you both as well for joining the panel. So if guys start with Oranda, your role at the Rockbund Museum, you could share with us how this came about and also your vision for for art patronage with the Rockbund Museum.
Thank you, Liyu. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you, Larys, for a very comprehensive overview into not only the vision and the platforms at the museum, but also I think Larys gave a really good overview of the gist, the spirit that we have at the museum. I feel like a key word of our patronage or our development work would be community. Like all of us come together to become part of the museum team, and a lot of the patrons we have, including Simeon, including Vince, who unfortunately because of sickness couldn't join us today, become friends and become more familiar with the Rockbund Art Museum as they become a very important part of our community. So for our development work, and when it comes to bringing people into our cause, it's all about a shared passion for sharing arts. It's all about the love of arts that we have. And lots of the platforms that we have is merely it's a gateway to exchange, a gateway to communication and collaboration. And I think that kind of defines how we here do our development works.
And I was just curious, from your kind of, because for, within mainland China, private museums and art patronage is a relative kind of a new idea and concept. So I was just wondering, from your kind of own personal experience, what are the particular challenges, or for instance, how did you go about kind of, was it easy? Was it just really natural for you? Because the young people now in China are very international, like, meeting Jie or Simeon, for instance. I mean, any kind of, could you just share with us kind of what was it like, to initiate the patronage program in the Rockbund Museum?
Well, I don't want to talk too much about the personal stories, but as we discussed before, maybe a little bit of an anecdote could help our audiences understand how communities come about. So I personally did not have a very strong background, academic background in arts, but I've been a lover of arts for many, many years. And well, I did study music, which is a different media of arts back in college. And you asked about how I came about joining the museum. I've been in an audience of the Rockbund Art Museum for, I'd say, 10 years. So I've come to the museum ever since it opened up. And in 2019, when I came back to China after working at a couple of posts around the world, I got an opportunity to work at the museum. And that opportunity only came around because I'm so familiar with the museum. I joined so many of the events. So, being an audience of the Rockbund, it was not only about going to the exhibitions when there is an exhibition, it's about being there at a lot of the education events. We have numerous amounts of speaker series, of panels. And back then we had like 3-day speeches for discussing curatorial practice in Asia. And essentially through these very intense and very deep events that I got to know the team, and I was completely sold by the idea of being a part of the team, and I joined the team very happily, and it's been 3 years since. And just to introduce maybe Vince a little bit, even though he is not here, Vince was one of the very important pillar of our Young Patronage program. He has been a collector and a lover of arts for many years, and he's also a patron at quite many museums in Britain and the US. And when he was back in China, he also supported not only the Rockbund Art Museum, but the story about he coming to the RAM was that he came inside RAM at one day, and we had like lots of common friends. It's a small community, like I mentioned, and he saw our exhibition. If I was not mistaken, it was back when Tobias' exhibition was still on, Tobias Frogier, and in 2019. So we sat down, we had a chat, we shared the vision of Larys at the time, and almost without hesitation, he joined on the spot. And ever since he joined, what we really enjoyed about Vince is that his support was not limited to monetary support. It was not just financial. He himself has started an independent space in Beijing. It has a very curious name. It's 3 Arts Project, because he, being a collector, being a patron, he also wants to connect a lot of the young artists and support the young artists in China. So with this nonprofit space and with this lot of efforts that goes into the Rockbund Art Museum's development when it comes to supporting younger artists or emerging artists, we had a very interesting cycle of working. So we engage not just about, oh, please support us financially, but more about coming together, sit down, argue, talk, converse, and try to come up with interesting ideas. And that also manifests through our connection and interaction with the SIMIAN collection. We have done an interview with Simeon, which is very rare because just to introduce Simeon a little bit, she has also been a very important collector in the Chinese contemporary world for a long time. But for the longest time, Simeon has kept a very, very low profile. It was almost impossible to find out who is she, what are the things that she's interested in, what are the artists Simeon likes. But starting maybe over the past 1 year, it has changed a little bit. And we also had the good fortune of carrying out an interview with Simeon to understand more about her ideas about not only collection, but also about patronage. I think maybe Jie can tell us a little bit more about how Simeon decided to become a part of our community as well.
Yeah, just maybe before I
Sure.
just
Thank
want
you,
to.
Lee. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jie. Just before I give you the speech, I want to highlight what Oranda was saying. I think the patronage for the museum is not only a plan, it's not only about financial support, it's to find the right people in the right place. Of course, in China, but everywhere else. But the change is also between the generations. What is very interesting in patronage is really how the younger generations is not only about investment. And it's not only about visibility, because they can have, and they have their own foundation or private museum or collection, like the Simeon Collection, but it's about how together we can build a fresh, a dynamic, and an open network together. So I think the patron, and also with the digital art, it will open many other doors. So is how can we from Beijing to Shanghai to other places in China and in Asia, we can really think about how the patronage can help different art organizations in the benefit, of course, of the collectors and of the art organizations. Sorry for that. Yeah, Jie, please go on.
Sure, no worries. Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Oranda. And I think I will share the vision of Simeon. I think Larry touched upon a lot of the same idea of what she thinks she values the best. And first, it's a great honor for me to be part of this conversation. I'm Jie, currently managing the Simeon Collection, which was founded by a Shanghai-based collector, Mrs. Simeon Wang. She has been on the patron circle of the Rockbund Art Museum, I think, for the past 2 years. I think she got to know the foundations before she joined. And she always kept those booklets whenever she came back after the exhibitions. So here at the Simeon Collection, we had acquired many important works from both well-established and emerging artists globally over the past 10 years. However, since the pandemic in 2020, we decided to start our official WeChat and Instagram account. It's for the first time to share about the artworks in our collection. I think the goal is to write about them, but mainly from a collector's point of view, what touches us the most and why we need to pay more attention for those works. So we combine academic research and constantly having conversations with living artists of those works. We hope to generate articles by understanding the artist's career in depth and to promote them beyond one single painting or exhibitions. So in the past year, we surveyed many artists, like we start with Alex Katz, I think continue with sculptor Botoya, Jules de Balincourt, Irish designer Joseph Walsh, Rose Wiley, and up to the most recent, we did Liu Xiaodong, among many other names. Those articles were widely read by our professionals, especially collectors. We were very inspired and encouraged with the result and wish to continue the journey. Being a patron of the Rockbund Art Museum, along with many other institutions in China especially, we kept asking, I think that's the question Simeon kept asking and discussing with me, what is most needed for those artists, for those institutions, from a collector or from a patron's point of view. Also, we had donated to museums, we sponsor so many young artists' career, and we loan works to exhibitions. What can we do more? So the Simeon Collection, which is a good news, in the process of becoming the SIMIAN Foundation, has a goal to bridge the gap between institution and artist, especially for those who haven't had their retrospectives realized yet at museums. For instance, I think one of the projects we're interested and keep working on is to cultivate academic research, especially writings for the artists we have a strong belief in. We realize when an artist is having exhibitions, especially outside China, saying a gallery show or museum show, there are lots of great writings by curators, scholars, professional art critiques, and even from artists themselves produced for the show. However, those materials are not available for the Chinese audience. So we want to invite Chinese curators and scholars to write about the artists and also to translate the existing writing into Chinese. We wish to publish them or just make them available online. So the same story would also apply for introducing our Chinese artists to the global community. So we could get a big picture about the artist, more than just one show from a certain period or looking at the paintings online. In such a way, I think artists, students, and collectors, I think our goal is to extend the research on paintings from our collection and beyond. There are so many important artists we would love to devote our energy on. I would say Amy Seelmans, David Hockney, Daniel Richter, Mark Tenzing, and so many more. I think since the foundation is quite different from a museum, we also wish to participate in museum programs by providing support whether you need it, both financially and non-financially. I know Larry mentioned about the Rockbund Art Museum programs. He called them projects more than exhibitions. So I would say people would benefit so much more from those conversations, artist books, research, so many more. And those could all be the parts we step in and collaborated with professionals from museum. And then once again, because we're new, so we're really open to conversations with you. Just let us know what can we do more and do better. And I think our Instagram is the same, called Simeon Collection, and with the WeChat Simeon 收藏. Thank you.
Thank you, Jie. It was a very nice, kind of introduction, and also give us kind of an insight about, what's happening, in the patronage circles and even the private foundation sector within mainland China, which, due to the COVID, I think, most of us now outside mainland China are sort of not privy to these new developments, which is very, very exciting at the moment. And so I was just wondering, Oranda, have you got any new, and Larys as well, and also to everyone, what do you think, moving forward now, in this phase of the pandemic, which seems to be continuing, and I don't think outsiders would be able to go easily to mainland China now, at least not in the near future. What do you all think, are the challenges? So what do you think, that, you all can do to actually to overcome this, so as to continue, to let the outside world as well be aware of what's happening, within mainland China?
Yeah, if I may, the question is very important and complex in the same time, because we are in a transition, like a passage, from, it's a question of civilization. It's not only a pandemic. It's about how can we foresee these changes. And so for our very small scale of the Rockbund Art Museum, hopefully when the pandemic started, we were closed for renovation. And then with the context of the pandemic, we tried to think about what is the meaning today of curating. Of course, you can curate an exhibition and it is still very, very precious. And how the patrons, the collectors can go along with us. So we started a research-based project, as Jie mentioned also, that could be important for a few supporters of the museum, but because it's about substance. And we wanted to keep this in this kind of very challenging context. So we went on with different projects with researchers. We conceived, for example, the curtain project that could be an evolving one for 3 years. And in 2020, during the pandemic, we mainly worked from China with a lot of workshops and connections with philosophers, anthropologists, artists, both from China, Asia, and any other part of the world. And then happened an exhibition in Hong Kong in 21, and then in 22 we will go on. So it's about these art projects that can have different formats, you know. It can start from research, then go to an exhibition, then go to a publication, then go to a workshop, and then go to the digital platform. In the future, we want to make this kind of very constructive combination. And so that's what we learned from the pandemic in a constructive way. But it's also about, I would say, the second point I want to mention is about resilience, because of course it was and it is still very challenging. This context, not being able to travel and to see our families and to experience the way of connecting with other artists and other institutions. So it's quite challenging. So, but yeah, it's more how can we conceive project from the small, then have a big picture, you know, like with groundbreaking exhibitions or something that is related to big names in terms of institutions. So during the pandemic, we try to think about what is the meaning of humility, integrity, sincerity, and engagement. So we started to conceive projects like with Piliana As You Go that can discover and explore other areas that have never been explored by the other museums. And also it's about connecting with amazing artists from Kazakhstan, for example, and curators from Ethiopia. And we invented and produced artworks. A Chinese artist, Jasfi Zheng, that has a wonderful and very subtle work. And this work traveled from Shanghai to Hong Kong and then to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia with different forms of visibility. And this is an example of project that makes sense when I talk about the museum, not only as a building, but really as a horizon that can develop unexpected roads, you know. It's not just to follow not really traced paths, but it's really to try to go along with other people and cultures that we don't know yet. But I believe into contradictions and frictions. It's not about conflicts, it's about constructive contradictions that makes our differences a rich potential for how we can envision the future after the pandemic. So yeah, this is what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. That was a very insightful and inspiring kind of insight, to to your vision towards how the museum would develop. And I thought I would kind of also throw a question for Oranda. And I know that the Rockbund Museum is in Shanghai, which is a very metropolitan city, very international. How do you see the role of patronage, let's say, reaching out perhaps towards other parts of China? Do you think about maybe reaching out to other Chinese potential patrons in other cities, or do you think that's something that is also something that could be kind of developed as well?
Well, just to answer that question very quickly, we do have patrons all around China. So in our patronage program, the people that we have the honor to work with are people who I'd say travel a lot. So Shanghai is a very important city. It's a harbor city, and the spirit of Shanghai, the history of Shanghai also constitutes a very important part of how we position the Rockbund Art Museum. So Larys has written many texts about our vision, but at least from my own understanding, what we do at the museum is beyond Shanghai. It is important. Shanghai was a harbor city. It's all about exchange. It's about connecting. So beyond Shanghai, we have brought in many international artists. Inside the museum, the exhibitions we have was not just about discussing the local context, but sometimes maybe about discussing the international context within a local setting. And this also defines a lot of our things. Sometimes we receive feedback saying that, oh, the Rockbund Art Museum, hosts another show of a foreign artist, but that's part of what we do. We invite the artists to come to Shanghai, to live here, to experience the city, and to promote that kind of exchange is something that we do very proudly. And Jie has mentioned that the Simeon Collection right now is somewhat interested in introducing the Chinese artists to the international stage and bringing more archive about the international artists to China to make to show more of those international artists' presence in China. And that just goes to show that how our vision of our museum goes beyond exhibition. So it's very consistent that our vision is beyond Shanghai as well as beyond exhibition. Lots of the interactions, lots of the connections that we carry out with our patrons, with our communities, is not through the exhibition that happens in the physical space of the Rockbund Art Museum building, but through the joint programs, the research programs, the education, the questions we asked over time. And just to touch upon an earlier question of you, Liyu, you asked if there were any challenges or if any changes went through the development track of the Rockbund Art Museum. I'd say that something that was really interesting for us was that over the past 2 years, because of the pandemic, the space was closed. The city was locked down for a period of time. And as Larys mentioned earlier, we happened to be going through a period of renovation as well over the past 22 months. So over that period, lots of people came to us and be like, oh, are you guys still open? Are you still busy? And I find these questions very interesting, but also quite inspiring. Lots of the work, I can tell you, very straightforward, we've been busier than ever. We had many programs that connect us with artists, researchers all around the world. And sometimes maybe we need to think more about how do we publicate it, but we're more like we want to show people what we have done after we've reached some milestones. But Jie knows that with our patron and with the community of people who actively contribute to the research programs, we are always in conversation. There are always ways for us to open up a dialogue with new collaborators and to open up a dialogue with our audiences. For example, when we're not having exhibition inside the museum, we have a satellite exhibition in Hong Kong in the Parasite space for Curtain. And for Curtain, it's not just an exhibition, it's an ongoing research projects that we collaborate with people around the world. And when I say collaborate, it means that we have regular workshops where people come together for 3 hours, sit down and think about really deep questions. Like Larys mentioned, we rethought what does it mean to be curating? What does it mean to be a museum, to be a public institution? So we had workshops. We also had an alternative space. So even though the museum itself wasn't open at the time, we had a very small, a modest, but very cozy space, not so far from the museum. And we had put in many different things in there. It used to be a library for a bit. It used to be a showcase space for our education programs. We have a very interesting education programs that's closely related to the history of Shanghai called Karange, which is the Shanghainese of living room. And we sometimes show some of the very scale, I wouldn't call it exhibitions, but more like a sharing session in that space. So through many different forms, we always kept the conversation open. We always kept information flowing amongst us, our patrons and our audiences. So that kind of also opens up the door to us having patrons all around China and internationally. Have I mentioned that Miss Elming Resch and Bernat Picasso with their foundation also supports the Rockbund Art Museum. And interesting enough, their support goes specifically into our education programs, which also goes to show that while what we do at the museum is beyond exhibition, the kind of contribution and engagement we get from our patrons is also beyond just exhibition.
Thank you, Oranda. I thought it's wonderful, to sort of to understand, to know that, Rockbund Museum has not only kind of, has got strong support locally, but has also kind of now kind of has support as well of international patrons as well. That's fantastic. And I'll just start, maybe Jie, would you just kind of share with us quickly. So are there any particular kind of projects in the pipeline with Rockbund, or anything that you are discussing or thinking about right now as a part of the patronage?
Yeah, sorry, Liyu, while we are exchanging very openly, I just want to scroll, if you allow me, the document so people can enjoy the slide. And also because last Friday was a very important day, because we reopened the museum with a really stunning, amazing project with John Armleten. So I just want, while we are talking, to share some of the pictures and the project so people can also enjoy. Okay?
Of course. Thank you, Larry.
So please go on.
Yeah, just wondering, if you could just, if there were any kind of, whether the SIMIAN Collection will be having any particular projects, or you are discussing anything in particular with the Rockbund Museum.
I believe there's so many opportunities. I think a SIMIAN Collection mainly want to focus on the research and the archive. And we had this conversation with Oranda before. We're talking about the RAM has a really wonderful library. And think if that could be something like we can use, or that'll be something we can sponsor to make it possible for not only the public, but make it possible and make it useful for researchers and scholars to use.
It's wonderful. I find it so interesting that within, within this last couple of years, even in spite of the pandemic, the world doesn't stop. And then in many cases, it creates wonderful new opportunities as well. And that, it's allowed us to focus as well more on our local communities. And in many ways, there are always kind of this, it's always a silver lining, and that the glass is always half, it's not just half empty, but always half full. So while Larry is, I'm unfortunately, I can't be with you all to see this wonderful exhibition of John, at which I have heard from Laura Massimo De Carlo, that is a wonderful exhibition. And that, and thank you as well for sharing with us, these slides, and I was wondering, how long would this exhibition last for? Maybe Larry can just kind of run up quickly and tell us what is your next kind of projects coming up, for Rockbund Museum.
Yeah, I mean, the way to work with John Armleten, I'm going back to the few slides, and I just received, thank you, Oranda, for sending the pictures, is really, he could not travel. He traveled just before the pandemic started. So he experienced the museum physically. And then we were talking a lot online to develop the projects. And for me, John is fully a curator. He is the painter that is a major painter of all the art history. But his way of making crazy proposals for the space of the Rockbund. It's just stunning, going from the second floor with this kind of connection, very minimal and also chaotic. When I talk about contradiction, is about this with paintings and furniture and carpets. And then on the fourth floor, that is amazing space with the daylight coming in. We try to build this, you see on the fifth floor, there are blue dots, but also a lot of drawings and archives from ECA, because for me, John Armleder is very, very well known and collected on the art market, and especially in Asia. But I think all of us, we need to learn more about his practice. He was really much involved in the Fluxus group and also inspired by John Cage, and then collaborating with sound composers and writing a lot. So that there is the archives in the MAMCO Geneva. Thank you to the MAMCO to have helped us to make visible part of the archive. So all this is on the fifth floor. And then there was another project on the third floor with the a designer, very famous designer in China, Leslie Zheng, and he John wanted to give a carte blanche to Leslie and to create this environment that can refer to the Chinese culture, but it is a calendar because it's related to daily life. And inside, when you go in, you have a kind of stadium and some kind of all objects. And then, as you can see here, John inserted some of his works. So it's a very beautiful and weird combination from two very important creators at the moment. And then out of the galleries, in what we call the foyer, he accumulated on each floor different materials that are for me painting. When I talk about painting, it's not only about with John, it's not only about the canvas, and it's this combination of colors with the clothes connected with the city, and it's also related to the individuality and the people. On other floors, there's a accumulation of crates and also Christmas trees. And so it was a beautiful project. And then we will go on with a solo project with Adèle Abdesmet, a French-Algerian artist. And we are working with a new production as a large video. But he, as you know, he's, I would say, as I say here, creative dissidents, because his history from North Africa to France was not easy in the context of the terrorism, but also his capacity to make very simple drawings like this charcoal drawings, and there will be a full floor dedicated to this, are very touching. So, and he's a non-compromising artist who is often misunderstood in the Western art community. So for us in the locality of Shanghai and China, it's a great honor to have him to contribute. And because of the pandemic, he cannot come neither, but all is going very well in the construction of the projects. And then it's already 2 years that we are working with the wonderful and generous female artist originated from Vietnam and now living in San Francisco and teaching a lot. And Trinity Minha is a major artist, but more known in the academic field, and we want to show for the very first time the project and to see how diverse can be the possibilities of working with sound, landscape, territory, and also the making of the picture. Yeah, here are some projects.
Terrific. Thank you thank you so much, Larry, for giving us a virtual tour of John Amadeo's exhibition in Shanghai on at the moment and some of your future projects, and that give us insight. I love the image of John's work against the backdrop of Shanghai, and that how the sort of, like you said, that it's a really give us a really insight and kind of what's happening within Shanghai now, and that nothing has stopped, everything is going on, and it's happy to hear that all these wonderful projects that are going on right now and it's undergoing with the Rockbund Museum. So I want to thank you, Larry, thank you Oranda, and also to Jie for your time, and also for sharing with us your insights and giving us really a glimpse and a wonderful kind of a first-hand kind of insight to what's happening with the private museum development within in China, and also regarding patronage. So thank you as well to our audience who joined us as well, and I hope that you enjoyed our conversation, and thank you very much, and look forward to seeing all of you again very soon in the flesh, if not virtually.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining, and see you at 5 for the next conversation on the conversation room. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.